Hey guys, this is Jake at That Fit Friend, and today I'll be reviewing the Nike Free Metcon 6. So 3 things to like about this model. Number 1, the free midsole in this shoe is a lot more responsive and plush than the Free Metcon 4 and 5. So if you bought those models and you wish the midsole was a little bit softer for running and jumping and HIIT, etc., you'll like this model. This model has a lot of comfort through the forefoot, and the heel is not as blocky. So the heel is actually a little bit more maneuverable, and so is the midfoot compared to those models. So if you were not necessarily the biggest fan of those midsoles and you always wish they were just a little bit softer for daily wear and jumping and a little bit more forgiving regarding how much bounce and responsiveness you get out of those shoes midsoles, then I think you will resonate with the Free Metcon 6. And that takes me into my second pro, which is this model feels kind of similar to the old school Free Metcon model. So my favorite Nike Free Metcon to date was the first iteration. Ironic since every model to date has since innovated, but the OG is honestly, I just think, the undisputed king of the shoe line. This model does have a similar vibe to that model. There is no longer like this really aggressive midfoot, so we have a flatter sole construction to the midfoot here. You feel a bit more stable when you're training regarding just how much surface area you get under the foot. Granted, this is still a plush midsole, so it's not stable in the sense of being super dense, but more so stable in that you can easily ground the foot when you're training, whether it's single leg work or with double leg work, etc. So if you were a fan of those older Nike Free Metcon models for training, I think you will resonate with this shoe. It has a nice athletic feel to it. This upper does a good job of giving you enough room, but also promoting enough security for training. And it does have a nice maneuverable forefoot, which gives it a lot more comfort too regarding its use cases. The third thing that I like about this shoe is they added back the flywire tech. And now, this is such a small, little, subtle construction difference that I don't think a lot of folks will pick up on, but in this model, you now have flywire on all 5 eyelets. This is a feature that the older models used to use and the older Metcon models use. I like this because it does feel like it gives this midfoot a little bit more like wiggle room regarding how you get and promote security with the shoe when you're training. So for example, when you're doing any form of lateral movement, any form of like aggressive sprint or jump, this flywire feels like it almost like catches the foot when you are putting stress into this upper. And now maybe that is a construction feature that does have a bit of nostalgia for me, and maybe it's not as useful as I like to think it is, but for my training use cases so far, I have thoroughly enjoyed the way this model's upper has felt, especially when it comes to locking down my foot and doing more aggressive, explosive movements in the gym. But now let's talk about a few cons that I have with the Free Metcon 6. So 2 cons that I have with this model is number 1, durability could be an issue for some folks. And now where the durability is going to be an issue in my opinion is where this midsole breaks. And now this has been a problem in other Free Metcon models, but what I've noticed is because this midsole is a little bit more plush and because this rubber I think has a bit more of a rigid construction to it, my midsole is starting to split at the base of the forefoot. I noticed this after doing heavier sled work. So all that said, if you are somebody who plans to do a lot of heavy sled work in these shoes and you're training on turf or even outdoors on concrete where you're gonna have a lot more friction, that concrete could be running hotter, be very conscious of this because I don't think it's going to be an issue that necessarily plagues everybody, but if you do have those use cases, I think you are setting the shoe up to have some failures regarding its durability, and it's kind of a knock against the shoe's overall quality regarding your investment. So all that said, I have thoroughly enjoyed the shoe for training, but that is not to say that there could be durability issues for some use cases, and if you are planning to train outdoors, do heavier sled work, basically do anything where you're gonna be having a lot of stress in that forefoot, be very conscious of that. I'm actually thinking about reaching out to Nike to get this replaced because this is literally after a couple of weeks, and if that does sound like your type of training, you might wanna pass on the shoe entirely and just not go through the trouble of having to do the whole return or just be conscious of your shoe's durability in that context. The second con that I have with this shoe is I like the upper regarding its security. However, this boot isn't the most stretchy. So if you have a higher instep or a thicker foot, you might have to battle to get this shoe on. For me personally, like I have a normal arch. Getting my foot into this shoe is not a problem. However, I did learn this the hard way after one of my workouts the other day. I took my foot out of the shoe and it was super sweaty and I tried to get this back on and it was a battle. So that said, if you do have a thicker or higher instep, or if you traditionally just have to battle booty style shoes to get them on, I don't think you're gonna get a lot of forgiveness with this model's boot. Again, it's not the most stretchy. I think for most folks, it's not gonna be an issue, but for my subset of folks who do have thicker feet, that could be something that's very concerning with this shoe for your case regarding just its overall feasibility for everyday use and training. To break down the performance of the Nike Free Metcon 6, I'll discuss how this shoe does for lifting, cross training, short runs, and daily wear. In the context of lifting, the shoe does a pretty pretty good job. And now look, it's not gonna be as stable as some of the other cross-training shoes on the market. For example, the Nike Metcon 9, Adidas Dropset Trainer 3, those will be much more lifting focused shoes. But if you are somebody that just needs that shoe for a little bit of everything and you're much more recreational with your strength training and staying around like 315, maybe 365 pounds and below, you can get away with wearing this shoe. I started to notice compression in this model's midsole once I started doing anything over 400 pounds, and that's whether I was on a machine or using a barbell. This midsole is just not that dense, so you will have a bit more plushness, so you will feel that foot start to give in once you need stability past 400 pounds. But for most lifting contexts, I have thoroughly enjoyed this shoe. The outsole has a nice grip. You get more rubber tread in this model than prior iterations. And for my workouts where I was blending more like athletic and dynamic style lifting with plyos, etc., that's where I think this shoe is going to excel, which is probably how most folks are going to use this model as well. You're likely not buying the Free Metcon 6 to max out your deadlifts and squats. And so all that said, for most recreational lifters, I think this model's stability will be fine. Again though, you will have some thresholds there in which this midsole will start to give way. When it comes to cross training, I have thoroughly enjoyed this shoe. I've actually liked this model more than the Free Metcon 5 for 3 reasons. Number one, I like that you have a more beefed up midfoot in this shoe. You just feel more grounded when doing different styles of plyos and athletic focused movements. So if I was doing jump rope, I like how flexible the forefoot is, but then if I was doing any form of box jump, I like how flat the foot feels because it gives me more surface area to explode through. And then if I was doing something like a skater stride and when I was coming in and planting my foot, I enjoyed this because I felt like I had more surface area to really ground the feet. The second reason why I've liked this shoe for cross training is the upper. Granted, the boot can be kind of a pain to get on, but once this shoe is on, this upper does, I think, a really good job at locking down the foot. Whether you're doing lateral work, explosive forward or backwards work, I don't think spillover is going to be an issue in this model for most folks, especially if your foot anatomy isn't glaringly too wide for the shoe's last. And so the upper construction has been a nice feature in the shoe. And then the third reason why I've liked this model is the rubber outsole tread and just how flexible the forefoot is. So this model feels really good and athletic, and because we don't have as dense of a heel, you get a little bit more wiggle room in play with this model's comfort in the context of different cross-training styles. Again though, my gripe against this shoe, and that's kind of like glaring flaw, is that durability issue. And so I'm curious, if you get the Free Metcon 6 and you do a lot of hard cross-training in your shoe, I wanna know, are you experiencing durability issues after a few workouts? Let me know in the comments below. When it comes to short runs, this model should work for intervals, sprints, and short runs. So if, for example, you're doing workouts where you're doing like 400 or 800 meter intervals and you're spicing in other movements, or if you're just doing like a 1 to 2 mile cool down or warm-up run, the shoe is comfortable enough for that context. The heel has a little bit of beveling, so it is a little bit more forgiving compared to prior models for heel strikers, but then you also have a nice plush forefoot up here that's really maneuverable for my midfoot and forefoot strikers as well, especially if you're boogieing at faster speeds. So for short runs, this model does a really good job. It's one of those shoes that's gonna work really good in class settings where you're doing some treadmill runs, but then also doing some kettlebell work and some dumbbell work. When it comes to daily wear, the shoe has done a really good job too. It's breathable enough, I think, to keep it comfortable for all day use, especially in hotter climates, and it's very comfortable. My only concern with daily wear with this shoe is if you're walking outdoors in wet or muddy climates, be very conscious of that getting into the foam here, especially if your shoe is starting to split like mine. That's going to accelerate this durability issue that I'm having to a greater degree. And then also on very hot days, I know it's like two ends of the spectrum here, I would say be conscious too of this midsole. Because this foam is soft, we know that hot concrete can typically create a lot of friction and abrasion on shoes, especially in shoes like this that have more exposed foam. So keep an eye on that. But if you want a shoe just for running errands and wearing out and about, this model is plenty comfortable and breathable, I think, for most contexts. When it comes to the price of the Nike Free Metcon 6, you can expect to pay $120. I think if you're investing in this shoe for HIIT classes, some daily wear, and some lifting, that price point makes a lot of sense. However, if you are trying to save money, look into the Nike Free Metcon 4 and 5. They have some steep sales right now, so when any new model comes out, it's always great to save money on past iterations, especially if you did like those shoes. All right, so now let's answer the question, who should buy the Nike Free Metcon 6? Number one, if you are a class-focused individual and you want that shoe for doing a little bit of everything and you're not necessarily super specific with your training needs, this can be a great do-it-all style shoe. The second context where I think this shoe makes a lot of sense is if you're somebody that is big on having a lot of forefoot maneuverability in your training shoes. You do get a lot of flex up here with this Nike Free Tech, and because this midsole is a little softer, you get more flexibility and wiggle room in this shoe than you did in the 4 and 5. The third context where I think this shoe makes a lot of sense is if you're somebody like myself who like the older Nike Free Metcon models, I think this shoe will actually feel similar to those than the past 2 iterations. Now, who shouldn't buy this shoe? Number one, if you're training outdoors or you're doing any form of serious cross training where you know your forefoot's gonna be very flexed and very weighted and loaded, I would say probably pass on this shoe. It might not be worth the stress of having to return this if you have the same durability issues as me. The second context is if you have high insteps and thick feet. This is going to be a battle to get on. So if you do decide to invest in this shoe and you do fall into that category, just prepare that it's not going to be the easiest shoe to get on, in my opinion, especially if you are trying to get them on in a pinch or very fast. The third context in which I think you should pass on this shoe is if you have a flatter foot. I don't think you're going to resonate with this shoe's fit and feel. You do feel a little bit of arch in the shoe. So I have a normal arch. I have picked up on that. So if you don't love any form of arch in your shoes, pass on this model as well. So when it comes to the sizing and fit of the Nike Free Metcon 6, I think most folks should be safe going true to size in this model. I have an E to double E width foot and a normal arch, and this shoe fits really true for my foot anatomy. Could it be wider up here towards the end of the toe box? Sure, but I don't think that's necessarily going to be a problem for folks who have a medium, narrow, or slightly wider foot width. Now I will say, once again, if you have a flat foot, you might want to pass on this shoe. And then also for my thicker and higher instep folks, this boot is not going to be the most conducive to your foot anatomy. All that said though, because I have been asked this in my past video on the shoe, this is a woman's colorway, but I'm fairly certain this model sizes unisex because they have the men's and women's sizes available on the site. I believe the men's release is just coming at a later date because of colorways. Now, obviously, if I'm wrong, somebody who knows more from Nike, please drop a comment down below, but I am fairly certain this model sizes unisex because this model is plenty wide for my foot anatomy, and so I think for most folks, again, true to size will be the safe call. All right, so now let's cover the weight, heel toe drop, and insole in the Nike Free Metcon 6. For my size 10 shoe here, we have a weight of 10.55 ounces. Nike did not give me the set heel toe drop in this shoe. The prior models were around 5 millimeters. This shoe does feel similar, so I would guess that that's a pretty safe bet in this model, and the shoe does have a thin foam removable insole. All right, so now let's break down the construction of the Nike Free Metcon 6. Looking at the toe box of this shoe, we have an extended outsole layer that wraps up. It's a little bit wider compared to its predecessors. And then looking at the upper in this shoe, we have a mesh and textile upper that wraps from the forefoot into the midfoot here. You can see there's a pretty clear break here between the boots material. We also have a synthetic overlay covering the toe box of this shoe. And then back here around the tongue and the boot, we have a more padded mesh throughout. So back here on the boot as well, you have additional padding in this model compared to its predecessors. We have 2 tabs here, one on the tongue, one on the heel, and then we have 5 core eyelets that go up with a loop here for security, and we have Flywire tech in all 5 eyelets. I'm so happy that they brought this back. Looking at the midsole, we have the Nike Free midsole throughout. It is a lot more plush and soft compared to the prior iterations, which is why I also like this shoe's comfort for cross training compared to the prior 2 iterations of this model. Looking at the outsole, we have a rubber tread that covers pretty much the entirety of the shoe. We do have exposed foam here at the base of the heel, and then once you break the forefoot up here, you can see that we do have some exposed foam as well. And this is where my shoe has started to break down, so keep a close eye on that if you plan to use this shoe in high stress contexts. This model once again does have a thin foam removable insole, but that pretty much wraps up the nuts and bolts of the shoe's construction. If you have additional questions, drop a comment down below. All right, y'all, that wraps up my review of the Nike Free Metcon 6. Now, would I buy this shoe again? Honestly, I'm torn. I feel like this is like a girlfriend that I love, but I know she might not be that good for me. And that's in the sense that I like this model's fit and feel and performance more than the 4 and 5, but because it broke after 2 and 3, it kind of let me down and kind of burned me. So if you do invest in this shoe, I would say be very conscious of the retailer you're buying them through, just in the event you do need to return them. So go through a Nike, go through a big retailer that will honor if this shoe breaks really fast on you. That's what I plan to do in this model, and I'll obviously drop an updated comment down below on the new model, and hopefully I don't have the same durability issue. Maybe this is a one-off case, but I wanted to make it known in this video. But all that said, if you have additional questions on this model, drop a comment down below or reach out to me personally on Instagram, whichever you prefer. And as always, drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel. I will see you guys in the next one.